This is part 2 of our producing lecture, and we're going to pick it up where we left off with this newscast here. And we're just going to watch a little bit of it, but you can see your rundown if you want to pull that up and look at it next to it. It has the entire show here. So this is an hour-long newscast, and I encourage you to watch the entire thing, because then you can see like a wide variety of consumer entertainment, different types of stories. But we're going to start with just a few stories in the A block and then kind of jump around, because I want to have time to get to the election special, because that's really when things get very challenging. So the election special is really about like how to avoid really big mistakes and how to adjust on the fly, whereas this show is just I mean, it's a pretty average show, but I do want to show you different ways of producing. So this is different than the last couple of shows that we watched, because the last one we watched was all weather. The one before that was very heavy in crime, and this one has kind of a different balance. So if before we start watching this, if you look into the rundown, since now we're learning how to read those, what do you think we're going to see after our open? What are we going to start with? I'll give you a hint here. At 8 o'clock in about 45. Yeah, it'll be a tropical stinger. And then we're going to go into what in A7? So what's A7? A VO, right. And then what's A8 going to be? Short weather. So short weather is that weather. We'll have a really fast weather hit in our A block, because in this instance, weather was a really big deal. So don't be afraid as a producer to bring a weather hit at the very beginning. So your lead story can be the meteorologist. It's really fast. So you see that my anchors are going to toss to my weather reporter really quickly for 15 seconds, and then the weather reporter is just going to, or the meteorologist is just going to talk for about 45 seconds. And that's all produced together with the main story that my reporter is on, which is also about storm. So you can produce into a package. Instead of just doing one package about storm preps, you can produce into it, which is what I want to kind of focus on in this newscast. Instead of just doing an anchor lead, which is a tossing to your reporter package and then a package and that's it, you can make it big like this. So in this case, all the way up here, and there's some kind of weird page error right there, so disregard this. There's no reason for that to be blank, so disregard the fact that this doesn't have a page number. But up here about A6 to A15, that's kind of one story. It's all weather, so it's not just a package. So let's watch it. You'll see it in the open, and we're going to stop a couple times again so that you can see like what we're building in our open, and then we're going to look how you can produce into your reporters, and how you can add extra elements like a VO lead in, and then full screens at the end to again push people to get more information. So this is the newscast. Let's start watching that, and I'll stop again and have you guys tell me what we're looking at. What was that? What story form did we just watch inside of the open? What's that? Right, it was a SOT-VO. It was a SOT and then continued VO. What was that? What's that? Another SOT-VO. Right. It was a nap pop of a song, which is a SOT, and a continued VO. What did we just watch? What is Rod doing? Huh? It is. It's a stand-up tease. Yeah, and I put a stand-up tease in my open. So that's another way to kind of show like that something's coming up. You can also do live reporters in your open. You can have the reporter in your tease, you can have the reporter in your open. This one's pre-produced, this one's pre-taped, but you can do it live too. So there's lots of ways to showcase what you have coming up. So I just wanted to make it a little diverse. You don't only want VOs in your open, you don't only want SATVOs, you want to try to make it a little bit different looking. And then anytime you have like a reporter stand up, if it's a tease, for example, like this, then it helps show that you have like a team covering this. What page number are we on? We're on A8. We're A8. This is where we're at right now. You can see we have a 3-shot because we have 3 people on our anchor desk. So we're on A8. What are we going to see next? We're going to see weather, a full weather report, and it's going to go for how long? How long is Ian's weather going to last? Correct. It's going to be 45 seconds. So if you're my meteorologist and I say, hey, I need an early weather at the top of the A block, then you can check the rundown and know, okay, I need to talk for 45 seconds. Okay, so we're going to kind of speed through this here in a second. I'm just fast forwarding past that. Okay, so I just fast forwarded past this 45-second weather, and then we came out to the 3-shot. Now we're on A12. So this is important because I'm leading into a story about stormwater preps, and that sounds like the most boring story ever. Guess what? People are cleaning out storm drains. Why do you care? We're going back to the very first thing that we talked about in this lecture. What's the point of every story? Your producer has to identify why people care, and right off the bat, the very first thing I show you in my VO, this is why you need to care. Remember what happens when we don't take care of our storm drains? This can happen to your car, right? So that's important to show right away. Instead of being like, people were cleaning out storm drains today, no one cares about that. But they do care about preventing things like this from happening. So it's important to use VOs when you have really dramatic video. And this is old video. So Jen is saying it right now, and I'll let her talk about this in a second, but she's referring to a storm that happened in the past. So if she's showing video, or if I'm showing video here about a story that happened in the past, what type of B-roll is this? What do we call B-roll like this? It's file video. So it's called file video because it's not B-roll they just shot today. It's definitely not wallpaper because it's very specific and we're referencing it. So it's not wallpaper B-roll. It's good B-roll, but it's file B-roll. What page are we on now? That's right, A13. We're in A13. And how long is Jen going to talk right now before we go into Rod Carter's package? 10 seconds. Correct. Yeah, 10 seconds. What are we watching here? Right, it is a package. So what is Rod doing inside of the package? It is a look live. Yeah, it's a look live stand-up. What kind of look live stand-up is it? It's an intro. Yeah, it's an intro look live stand-up because it's at the very beginning of his package. Okay, so this is his package. We're on A14, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of move ahead here a little bit. After his package, we're going to come out to a full screen. It's going to give you some more information. And then we're going to go into Chip Osowski package here coming up next. So as a producer, what I'm doing right now as we're watching Rod's package is I'm getting in Chip's ear. He has an IFB in his ear, and I'm telling him, hey, Chip, we have, and I'm counting down how many seconds we have until we get to Chip. I'm going to say, Chip, we have about 45 seconds till we get to you. Stand by. That way he knows we're about 45 seconds out. Chip should be able to hear this in his IFB. So he dials in with his cell phone. He should be able to hear the package, and he should have known by looking at the rundown what is coming up before him. So he's standing by ready to go. That's very important for any of your reporters to know. You need to stand by looking in the camera. Don't be talking to people. Definitely don't make faces. Don't do anything weird, because at any moment they could cut to your live shot. And sometimes that's an accidental thing that happens, like they accidentally punch you up and you don't want to be doing something bad. I've also had reporters like just saying like nasty things about their coworkers or something stupid, or commenting on the story, and then all of a sudden their mic is hot, which means that their mic is airing on live TV. So be very careful. So Chip knows at any moment he could be live. So he's standing by, he's quiet, his mouth is shut, he's looking straight into the camera at this point. So right now we're at the end of the package in A14, and Rod is doing a stand-up close. So he's doing a tag, look live, stand up at the end of his package, and then we're gonna come out to a full screen, and then we're gonna go into what in A17. What are we going to see after the full screen? A stinger, right. And we're going to hear Josh's voice underneath the stinger, and he's going to say new at 8. That's what the branding is going to be for that stinger. Okay, so what's going to happen here in a second? You see this monitor next to Josh? What are we going to see in that monitor in a second? Looking at A19, what's going to be in the monitor? Yeah, we're going to have the live reporter pop up in the monitor. So Chip Osowski is going to pop up here in just a second. Then what is Chip going to do for this story? Yeah, he's going to do a live stand-up, and then he's going to toss to his package. Then we're going to come out and see him do a live tag, and then double boxes. And I floated A24, I think for time. I think I was just really heavy, and I was like, we'll kill that because I save. How many seconds do I save by killing A24? Right, I save 10 seconds. Okay, so then you're going to see this, and I'll skip ahead. Okay, so that's his live shot. Now we're going into a package. And now I'm just going to kind of skip ahead a little bit, and because we did this a little bit earlier. I encourage you to watch this on your own, but I kind of just want to show you what's coming up next. We know after this, we're going to go into a VO-SOT-VO, we're going to have a VO, we're going to have a couple of VOs here, and then I killed A35. This is another way that producers can help their timing, is if you have a VO-SOT-VO, just kill the SOT-VO, just air a VO. You can totally do that. So that's something in my head. When I started, I used to write it down. Now I can just go in and kind of remember what my plan is. But if you're a new producer, I encourage you to have a notepad, just like a piece of paper. And I'm a big fan of writing on my cell phone and doing things on the computers. But for me, it was really actually very helpful to have a notepad, and I would write down, here's all the stuff I can kill. And I would write A35, and then I'd put, it's 15 seconds long, so I know that I would save 15 seconds. And I would write A24 I can kill, that's 10 seconds. So I know I can kill 25 seconds out of the A block if I need to, if I'm starting to get a little heavy. And I'll do that throughout the show. I know, for example, looking up into the D block, I've put 2 packages in my D block back to back. This is a little unusual. I haven't actually seen many other producers do this, but I really think that you should. I think it's helped me tremendously, and my directors loved it because I was prepared already. So if you look at the D block, which is on the 8:30 side of the show, I I prepared for a package that was about 1 minute and 26 seconds. And then I had a whip version of that exact same package, which was 50 seconds. So I knew if, for example, I got heavy, I'd float D11, which is my long version of the package, and we would just air the whip, which is D12. So how many seconds would I save by killing D11 and airing D12? Got to get better at this simple math. 36 seconds. So I saved 36 seconds by killing D11 and airing D12. I did something very similar here in the D block where I did the same thing for D16, where I killed the long package and I ended up airing the whip, which was like 59 seconds. So in this case, quick, how many seconds did I save? Right. So how many seconds did I just save in this much time? So that's what producers need to be able to calculate in their heads. So 36 plus 35, and then you add all of that up, and then you can, that's called your back timing. It's really helping you time. And look, I did the exact same thing again here in the D block because there were some things happening that day that I wasn't really sure of. I didn't really know if there was something that was going to happen. So I've now prepared myself and I've given myself like like a minute and a half of wiggle room, which is a tremendous amount of wiggle room for a producer. So I could be a minute and a half light or I could be a minute and a half heavy and I could fix it with no problem at all. No one is affected by this. I just float, float, float. I don't have to move my anchors around. They don't have to read different scripts. The directors have already coded it. It is like my favorite thing in the entire world. So I was in the position where I could do that because my reporters had cut both packages and whips for me, which is awesome, which is really great. So that's what I wanted to show you about the D block. And I'm going to move ahead a little bit here to another show, but I just wanted to show you that. One last thing, let's maybe take a look at this weekend buzz package because we haven't really done anything entertainment related. Let's take a look at let's start at about F11, which is at about, or maybe F8. So that's like 820 or 852, 853 or so. And we'll watch something at the very end and then we'll go into the election special here. If my computer will work. So what I'm trying to show you is a tease for this. This is the end of a now showing package, which is basically just a package about the movies that are happening and everything like that. So we'll watch the end of that. Then we're going to look at F8, F9, F10, F11, because it's a little hard to see what we're looking at here. And I want you to see this part. And I also want you to see that you can come out of a break with a SOT. That's something that I think is super fun. Okay, so now we're at F8. We're looking at F8, which is a 2-shot, and they're going to get into a tease. Okay, this is F9. So it's a SOT, and it's the anchors at 11 p.m. shot a little tease to push my viewers to watch their show. So that's F9, and that's about 21 seconds. This is F10. This is F10. Now, oh, excuse me, this is end of F9, and then we're going to get into F10. Okay, so now we're in F10. Now we're teasing ahead for a morning show. So that's Gail Garotto doing a stand-up tease that she shot earlier that I put into my show there. And now I'm going to get to F11 in a second, which is going to be my tease for the G block. Okay, so that G1 was a SOT coming out of the break, which is a really fun way to come out of breaks if you can. So it was a SOT because there's music playing full, and then it was a VO because it was my reporter who was, or excuse me, my anchor who was reading underneath that VO. And now we're on G2, which is a 2+ BAM, and they're going to toss to a quick weekend buzz package. One of my students actually made this package. So she came to News Channel 8 with me, and we wrote and edited this package together, and it aired as a fun little weekend buzz thing. So you're welcome to watch the rest of that. Since we're a little tight on time, I'm going to skip this, but it's pretty cool. It's a fun little thing, so it's not all hard news. I know we've been looking at a lot of hard news lately, but take a look at the rest of these shows so you can see, Donut Day, there's lighthearted stuff here. It's not just heavy news. And then I think, let's see, I think we'll have time to watch a little bit of this. Let me see here. Oh, this is a morning show. I'm going to skip the morning show, but watch this show on your own. Watch this one here, and then read this because I explain, why I'm floating things. I explain like a few different things here, and the morning shows are slightly different. I think we'll probably just do the election coverage, and then maybe we'll have time to get to consumer. But I wanted to show you that there are also consumer blocks. So I'm going to scroll here just to kind of show you a C block. It's a B block and a C block here of just consumer news. So it doesn't just have to be hard news. Do you have a question?
Yeah, as the producer, are you deciding when to do the breaks as well? Or are those preset and then you're going based off of when those breaks are?
That's a great question. So the question was, does the producer decide when the breaks are going to hit? And in this case, I don't have hard times in this newscast. It's pretty normal to have fluctuating block times. So my A block isn't always going to be 10 minutes. My B block isn't always going to be 3 minutes. But like, for example, let's take a look. I'm super happy that you asked that. So I just want to show you this as an example. So in this example, my A block was done at around 8:10 or so. I usually want it to be about 10 minutes or so, because I want to be into my B block before the quarter hour. And I'll explain a little bit. This has to do with ratings. So the way that Nielsen ratings work is they measure viewers every 15 minutes. So if a viewer watches for 15 minutes, you get a point for them, basically. So what happens is if my A block was over at 8 o'clock and 14 minutes, and then I go to break, the chance of them changing the channel during the break and losing that whole point for them is very high. So the goal is to kind of strategically place your blocks and your breaks in a place so that you encourage them to be watching. So they come back at 8:13. If they're still watching, then we get that point for them because they're watching a full 15 minutes. And you see my B block doesn't end until like 8:18. So they've been watching that 15 minutes, and I get points for them watching. The way that Nielsen stuff works is going to change in the next 10 years because fewer people are watching live news. So that's going to change drastically because we're getting a lot of analytics on how people are actually watching when you can stream. But this is really based off of traditional live broadcast news logic. So I cannot decide that my break is 3 minutes and 10 seconds. That's set. The sales department decides that they've sold 3 minutes and 10 seconds worth of commercial space. And sometimes they'll put promos in there too for the station or for other things. But they've decided that break 1 is going to be 3:10, break 2 is going to be 3:05. They decide all of that. And they put that in something called a log. So the producer every day wants to come in and you want to look at the log to make sure that your break times are usually the same every day, but sometimes they change. So you'll know break 1, break 2, all those breaks, but you decide how much to fill in your blocks. So if I filled a ton of content in my A block, I could end the A block at 8:13 if I wanted to, but because I have a 3-minute block, I'd get back into my B block at like at 8:16 or something like that, and that would hurt my chances of getting the ratings point. So it's strategic, but I can adjust. So for example, there are some times where you don't really want to do that. One of those instances is if you see my break 3 here, I know it's 3 minutes long, and I really want to get into my D block by 8:30. I never want to get into it later than that. So I try to make sure that I'm into my 8:30, because in live TV world, people change the channel like every half hour or so, because their show ends and then they change it. So I try to actually start my 8:30 half hour earlier than 8:30. I don't want to get into my 8:30 at 8:31, because then I've lost a lot of opportunities to keep people there. So I back time. I try to back time into every break, but really I back time into every half hour. So I want to make sure that I'm out early enough so that I'm done with like the C block at 8:27, because then I have a 3-minute break and I have time to get back into my open for my half hour. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So the big out time that's very important is the end of the show, which I think I kind of cut off here, but it's 9 o'clock. It's 9:00:00. So really you get out at like 8:59 and 59 seconds. So it's very important to back time, because otherwise you'll just get cut off. So you don't want to do that. You want to back time it so that it ends precisely at that time. So you'll always have a news hole that you can fill, but the producer's responsible for making sure that the ear blocks aren't too short, that they're not too long. If you've ever seen newscasts like that where you watch the whole thing and then you come back and they're like, goodbye, and that's annoying, right? That sometimes is strategic, but I try to add something. So in this case, I had a weekend buzz package. Other times you have, hey, here's all the headlines we covered for today. They'll do like a rehashing of things. Sometimes they'll just do another kicker there. I always have a little final weather. If you're producing a show, I really encourage you to do final weathers, because these weather things are flexible. Packages are not flexible. It's going to be 134 unless I put a backup whip. But my final weather at the very end is really nice, because I can tell her to go 10 seconds. I can tell her to go 35 seconds. I can tell her to do whatever. And she can be that really cushy ending that gets me out right at 9. So having that final weather at the end is a really good move, if the producers can change that. And I also do bump outs. So like I wonder here if I can. I love bump outs. Some people do live bump outs where you'll take a look at like what it looks like outside or something like that. Oh, sorry, it was Ian. It wasn't Julie, so I was saying she. But in this case, it's Ian. So I also do a bump out. So like if you listen to the end of this, I have like a little music and stuff like that. That's to help my pacing, so I get out on time. So hear it in a second. So his mic clips for a second there, but other than that, you see that music is. Some people have a lot of it. This was because it was Friday night, and every Friday it's like a Friday night show. Like you want to try to make it kind of fun. At least I was allowed to do that, so that helped. But that will also help. Some people have bump outs in every single block. I used to do that for my morning show, so I'd have a bump out in every block, because then I could kill 10 seconds in every single block. And if you have 6 blocks, that's a minute that you can remove from your show if you get heavy. So does that kind of answer your question? That was a really long answer. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. Thank you for that question. So we're going to watch the election special now. Brace yourselves, because there's lots of blood in this newscast. That's what it's called. It's bleeding because there's red everywhere. Okay, so we're going to watch the 8 p.m. November 8th, 2016 show. And I'm going to pull these up here so you can watch them at the same time. This is the hardest show, in my opinion, this is the hardest show a producer will ever make. Election shows are incredibly difficult, especially if your show starts when all the polls are closing. So that's what happened to me this last time. I was producing an 8 p.m. newscast, and all of the polls across the country started closing at 7, at 7:30, at 8, at 8:30, at 9, which means all the results were coming in. And you don't necessarily know who's going to win. For example, we did not know that Trump was going to win at all. We did not actually expect that. I was one of the many people in the media who didn't expect that that was going to happen. But you never know. So you want to make lots of backup plans, but it's not just the presidential election that we all watch. When you're doing local news, it's state races, it's local races, it's tons of stuff. What's that?
I just noticed the Temple Terrace City Council.
Yeah, Temple Terrace, exactly. So it's lots of local races. So you really have to be up on all of your politics to know, first of all, what matters. Like, and you can anticipate, like, oh, we all know this person's going to win. So, like, let's build the show in such a way that when they come out for their speech, you have an idea that that's what's going to happen. So you want to anticipate, like, ahead of time, who are all the big races we're watching. Obviously, presidential races is that's the biggest, right? But also like governor races. We have all sorts of races that you could have, Senate races. There's all sorts of big ones. So you need to know ahead of time when they come out and they've announced that they've won. They're going to give concession speeches. They're going to give, like, come out and say something, and you don't know when that's going to happen. And you have to be watching a big wall of monitors and identify, like, first of all, whose race is that? Like, what camera is that? Where is it pointing at? Is that Mark Rubio's? Is that, whose is that? Because oftentimes it's just a stage. And you don't necessarily know. I mean, sometimes there's banners with their names, which is awesome. But sometimes, too, they'll cut to, like, a close-up of a podium. And you're like, somebody's coming. You have to anticipate that someone's going to come out and talk. And you need to know, is this one big enough for my viewing area? Does this matter to them? Am I going to cut into that? And in this case, we do a lot of cutting in the 8:30 half hour. So I want to show you, before we start, a couple of things that I did. The biggest thing here is that I put 8:32 through 8:34. What happens if Clinton wins? What happens if Trump wins? And then at 8:32, it's right now we don't know who's winning. Here's video of both of them. So you always want to have video of each one, and you have to have scripts ready to go, like, Clinton won by this much, Trump, it looks like Trump is going to win, this type of stuff. And then we had reporters everywhere. So this is massive live team coverage, which is why elections are also very difficult, because as a producer, a package is way easier than a live reporter. And the biggest reason is because live reporters will either keep talking or shut up before you need them to. And then your timing is way off. And you have to constantly readjust your timing in your head, and prepare the next reporter coming up. So in this case, Rod Carter was my first person, and you want to be very good with your slugs. Slugs are so important. In this case, to be super clear, so everybody knows, it's Rod Carter is my reporter, and he's covering the Clinton race. Then Melanie is my reporter in the next one. She's covering the Trump race. Then Candace is my reporter in the next one. She's covering the Rubio race. Then John, and he's covering the Murphy race. Then Jeff is covering Amendment 2. So your slugging is really important as a producer so that everybody understands exactly who's where and what's happening. And then I built in all this extra stuff that I could kill, like a weather thing, which normally, depending on where you are, you might have weather in your election special. I just put it in there just in case something goes wrong and I need her, but I didn't actually end up needing her at all. But this is a really good way to save 2 minutes of your show. I want to show you beneath the black line is backups. So what happens when Murphy is going to concede? I stacked a whole thing. I said, okay, we're going to start with the 2 shot of anchors, then we're going to go to a stinger, then we're going to go to a live shot, then we're going to go to press boxes, then we're going to back out to the 2 shot. I put all the lower thirds in. Murphy concedes, and then I put everything in. In this one, we were pretty sure that this was going to happen, so I made a Rubio victory speech one. I made a Jolly victory speech one. I made one for every possible outcome. So it's a lot of work, and your directors have to code every single one of these potential things, because you don't want to just on the fly start doing things, because Ignite, remember, is your automation system, and it's important to work in unison with that. So some stations, like I worked at stations where they didn't use Ignite, and it was just the director punching, and it was old school, and it was like super free, but also that's pretty stressful if you don't have a big crew. So in this case, on the bottom of my black line, which is the end of that half hour, I put every possible scenario that might happen so that if when it does happen, I can just highlight this and drag it up into my rundown, and all the scripts will pop into the teleprompter. So I wrote it like, breaking news, we just found out Murphy's conceding. He's walking up right now. Like you write it as though you anticipate that it's happening, although you don't know what's going to happen. So that's the biggest thing with elections. So let's watch the first half hour, and then we'll get into the second half hour, which is a very different half hour filled with anxiety that I lost 10 years of my life off of. And you will see why in a second. But it's super fun. It is. I'm so happy this was actually the last newscast I ever produced, which was I went out with a bang. So let's watch this first A block and follow along and kind of understand when you're doing election coverage, what should you be writing to? What type of video should you prepare ahead of time? Same thing as when we talked about hurricane coverage. You know what's going to happen. You know you're going to need video of people voting. You know you're going to need booths. You know you're going to all the things that you know you're going to need ahead of time. So watching this can really prepare you for your first election coverage. So we're going to start again with an open. It's about 50 seconds. Then we're going to come out here to a stinger, and already in my open, right at 8 o'clock, we got breaking news. So during the open, I was talking to my anchors about this. I floated 832 through 834, and I'll just show you a little bit. And remember when I talked to you about the team coverage graphics? Here's one example of one of the team coverage boxes. I made 2 graphics, one for each half hour, because I had so many reporters. So I had like 10 reporters in my show, like live reporters, plus some other ones. But in this case, I knew Rod was going first, then Melanie was going second, then Candace, then John, then Jeff. So I found all their photos. I wrote to the graphics department and I requested it way ahead of time. I think I did it the day before. And so you want to make sure that's all prepared because you want to show people that you have, you know, a big team and everybody's working on it.
Right now, all news contentious elections in history after FBI investigations and sections of accusations it's been racist almost a law.
Okay, so how many thoughts did I pull from there? Already my open script was nuts, right? All those sound bites, all those things leading into elections. When you're doing coverage, you could cut that a week early. You say, oh, that's a good sound bite. That's a good nap pop for my open. Oh, this is a good one. Every time they say something like that, you could do that way early ahead of time. So the more things that you can do ahead of time, the better you will feel when election day comes. Thank God this was not my first election because, oh, another thing I forgot to mention that we're going to look at in a second. This coverage was also simulcasted. And I found out it was going to be simulcasted that day, which was like the scariest thing in the world. That means that when we were talking about hard times earlier, my show now had to have hard times because we were going to cut in and stream live on 2 channels. So I was airing on Great 38 and on NBC at the exact same time, but they all have different things going on. So NBC had their coverage going on. I don't know when their breaks are going to come up. I don't know when they're doing stuff because it's all flexible because it's breaking news, it's whatever. So we had to time it very precisely and have hard outs so that at the exact same time, we could be broadcasting on 2 stations at once. And we also had to think script. How do you talk to an audience who's just been watching for 20 minutes and you don't want to repeat everything you just said because they're like, why are you repeating it all of a sudden? But you also have a whole new audience who's watching the simulcast cut in who hasn't heard all this stuff. So it's a very challenging technical situation and a producing situation. And this is one of those instances where you need hard times. So otherwise, you would have flexibility to say, oh, let's go to break 1 whenever I can, you know, but in this case, you're like, no, I need to hit it precisely on the second, which is very difficult when you have live reporters. So I'll stop talking about that. I just forgot to mention that before we started watching. And let's watch the rest of the open. Okay, real quick, I'm going to go back to their outfits. Election coverage, you don't want to wear red or blue, depending on who you're covering, because it looks like bias, right? So they're both wearing black. So she was still winning at 8. But this is an RSS feed. So this is one wonderful thing that producers don't have to do anymore is I didn't have to type in her percentage or his percentage because this is an RSS feed that feeds directly into my graphic system. So all those numbers are going directly in. So remember at the very beginning we talked about different types of RSS feeds. This is an example when you'd use an RSS feed on live television, and you use it all the time for stuff like that. You can also see the graphics at the very bottom with the percentages and all that stuff. There are huge teams working on this, but they push all of those numbers in so that I don't have to, thank God, I don't have to stress about that. In this instance, I do have to watch them, and I do have to make sure that they're accurate, and I do have to sometimes update things like this, but in this case, those are RSS feeds. I didn't have to type in 3,414 and 717 people just voted for Hillary. Like that would kill you as a line producer for the live show. You might have associate producers who are helping you do all of that, but as a news producer, when you're producing that live show, it is very difficult to do all of this because you want to be updating it very, very frequently. So just so you know, these numbers are an RSS feed. So what is Rod Carter going to give me today? What's Rod Carter giving me? Yeah, live VOSOT. It's not a live VOSOT VO. As soon as the SOT's done, he's going to come back on camera. So it's a live VOSOT. And then what's going to happen at the end of his live tag? They're going to have split boxes. So remember how before we called all boxes, we called boxes. And at the end in A42, it's going to be split screen. And then it's going to have Rod Carter there and Josh Benson. So this is where those initials are really important because now we have 10 people in a show. And like all of them start with the letter J. John, Josh, Jen, all of them. So it's important to know everybody's names. So let's kind of, for the sake of time, fast forward a little bit because he'll do his VO, he'll do his SOT, he'll do a tag. And I have scheduled about 1 minute and 45 seconds total for Rod. And then I did the same thing for Melanie coming up. 1 minute and 45 for everything here. And for her, I floated A47. So I don't remember if she didn't send the video in on time or if there was a problem with the editor or whatever it was. Doesn't matter. A47's dead. But in those cases, it's important so that the reporter knows that there's no video covering them. So here's the end of Rod's tag. Right now we're on A41, and we're going to watch the very beginning of Melanie's. So obviously it's super loud. That's also what makes it difficult to do election coverage, because the producer needs to talk to the reporters, and oftentimes the reporters can't even hear you, and they can't see what's going on either. The reporters don't have a feed of what's happening. They are only relying on the producer to tell them in their IFB when to go. So what I'm doing as a producer right now, Melanie's going up, and then I'm looking for Candace, and I'm shouting as loud as I can into Candace's ear how many seconds she has until she's up. So I'm shouting probably around now, it's about a minute. So I'm like, Candace, 1. And so you don't want to say minute, you say 1, and that means 1 minute. And then you like shout as loud as you can. And then if you're a reporter, it's great to like nod or tell me that you heard me, because that's difficult. That's a really hard thing about election coverage. So right now we're doing Melanie Sott in A48, and then we're going to come up here in a second. What happens here in Candace's coming up in just a minute is that during the soundbite, the race was called for her person. So live, we're having breaking news, and so I'm going to let you see how they ad-lib that. I talked to my anchor in the ear because Candace couldn't hear me at that point, and she didn't see that it had been called. So I told my anchor so he could do it, and it doesn't look like she messed anything up. It just happened. It was breaking news that happened last. So he's not correcting her. They're working as a team. So let's, as soon as Melanie's done, we'll get out on A50 here in a second with some split boxes, and then we'll go into a Senate clip, which is probably more like, we'll see what A52 is going to be here. So that's a clip. That's A52. So going into her stand-up, only 23% were reported. But then they called it during her stand-up that Marco Rubio had won. So let's watch that. So while this is happening, I'm looking to see if they're calling it. Are they really calling it? Are they calling it? Can we confirm? Can you confirm? We're like trying to frantically confirm if he just won. At the exact same time, I'm talking to John, who's coming up in 1 minute, telling him your VO and your SOT isn't in. You're going to do a straight live shot. You're just going to do live without a VO, without a SOT. And I'm telling him by now I'm running out of time. So I was planning on him being 1:30, but I think I'm telling him 45 seconds. You have 45 seconds total, no VO, no SOT. And at the same time, while I'm telling my anchor, Josh, that the race was called for Rubio, he needs to ad-lib that in the tag. I'm also looking ahead, at Jeff, who is now running out of time. I'm telling him, no VO, no SOT, we don't have time, because remember, we have hard times now. In this SOT, he just was declared the winner. So listen how they ad-lib this, my bad. So now we're A58. So it's important that you communicate that way. If you're an anchor, if you're a reporter, it's teamwork, right? Don't be like, well, you missed it, because it's such a hard. She's live on air. She can't be like reading and talking and research. It's very difficult. So you have to help each other out. So now John Rogers is doing his. I've killed A64, A65. I've killed A72, A73 because of time. And I'm telling them you have like 30 seconds. Wrap, 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 wrap. And I'm shouting in their ear because we've run out of time. We've used up a lot of it because my first few reporters went long. And now I have a bump out here for a live pick, which you'll see because I mentioned bump out here a second ago, and you'll see what the bump out is. I've also, one of the things that we are looking ahead in here, this is the time I'm simulcasting. At 8:24 and 30 seconds exactly is when I'm going to simulcast and be on both channels at once. So I've already killed my weather, and I've already started talking to everybody about what I'm planning for my B block, and then I have 3 minutes in my break to communicate this to everybody. So I shortened this considerably. This was supposed to be much longer, but I built in extra time so that I could cut away from it. So now we have Jeff here. He's not doing a VO. He's not doing a SOT. That's called a straight live. You're just doing a straight live. So I got in Jeff's ear, straight live, no VO, no SOT. But then I told they don't need page numbers because the reporters are out in the field. They're not looking at pages, but I'm telling my directors and my floor directors, everybody, A72, A73 is dead. And they know that means no VO, no SOT. So let's skip ahead a little bit here. I floated all this stuff to save time. I've shut down, I've really made this much shorter. And here at the end of my C block, in a second, I'm going to tell them that they need to time out precisely here. If my D block needs to start at 8:24:30 and my break 3 is 3 seconds, what time precisely do I have to end my C block in? These are the type of questions we're going to have on the exam. So my break 3 is 3 minutes. And I have to start the D block at 8:24:30. And if you notice here, my back timing, kind of disregard this column because it's all jumbled up because it's normally it's pretty accurate, but in this case there's tons of extra content, and now I'm kind of back timing in my head because I have all this extra stuff that looks like I'm heavy, looks like I'm light, but I know in reality it's because of all the things I'm killing and all the things I'm adding. But the things you do know, here are the elements you know. D block has to start at 8 o'clock, 24 minutes, 30 seconds. My break 3 is exactly 3 minutes. So when exactly do they have to stop talking in my C block? Yes, 8:21:30 is exactly the time that my director has to cut to break. And then here is the simulcasting. This is now simulcasting. It's going to be on both channels. We have live shots, we have congressional races, we have updates here, we have some bumps, and then again at the very bottom, just in case at any time, if Clinton wins, if Trump wins, we have these ready to go, just in case that happens. So I'm going to skip ahead to the 8:30 half hour to kind of show you when it gets when the excitement starts. It gets a little crazy. So far, it's been very traditional. It's been a super traditional half hour of an election night. The really rough stuff happens here in the E block when now lots of races are being called. Let me see where we're at here. Sorry, it's tiny, so I'm trying to get to 8:30. Okay, here we go. So right now we're going to come in at E2, excuse me. This is E2, and if you notice, my timing over here is completely out of whack. My front timing is correct because my show starts at exactly 8:30. My E block starts at exactly 8:30. Again, these are hard times now because I had a simulcast. But it says my back timing is 8:47:40, and that's just because I've floated all these things, I've added things, I've done all these crazy things. So this is why back timing in your head is really also very important. So let's take a look. Lots of stuff kind of starts to go wrong here in this half hour, and it's just because it's a chaotic time. So I'll point out a couple of those things, but we'll start watching and then I'll kind of stop it here. But you can look ahead of time. E2, which is what we're on right now, is a reopen. It's supposed to be 10 seconds. Then we're supposed to come into a stinger. Then we're supposed to come into a clip at E5 that's supposed to be 30 seconds long, and we do not see our anchors at all until E6. This is where some of the mistakes happen. The anchors have to know how to read the rundowns because your face is not going to be on camera until E6. So do not ad-lib in E4 and E5. That is crucial because we have specific singers and clips that are up. And so the ad-libbing here really messed it up. So you'll see what happened here. So my anchors, they're wonderful and I love them. And it's also a communication thing. I'll say we need to ad-lib in E6 that whatever happened. But if you ad-lib it before and if you ad-lib it in E5, this is what happens. No update on Amendment 2, that's supposed to happen in E6. They skipped the script in E5 and started ad-libbing. But we're supposed to be on E5 for 30 seconds. So guess what happens? So now they're reading the script from E5, but we're looking at E6. You guys understand how that happened? So whatever, in election coverage, you move on. Not a huge deal, but I wanted to explain to you what that was there. Okay, so this is when everything starts to fall apart. So all of a sudden, we've heard, right? We knew that Rubio won. So what are we expecting? His opponent to concede. So we think he might concede at any time. But they're not all timing their concession and victory speeches at the same time. So sometimes they overlap, sometimes stuff goes wrong. If you see what happened here, after Chip, I had added Murphy's concession speech, and you can tell what the page numbers that I had anticipated it being after Chip, and then I floated it all. So then what happened is after Chip, we're going to come out to Mark. I floated his thought, and I'm like, we're very tight on time. Mark couldn't hear me, so he kept talking, and I'm like shouting to wrap. So we've lost a lot of time by the time we get through here. So I floated E17, I floated E12.1 and E12.6, and then right around here, I'll play it so you guys can kind of see it. Follow along with what starts happening in this terrifying section of the rundown. All right, I'll unmute this so you can listen to the rest of this.
Sure.
We're on E11 now. So we're on E11. So where's this one shot in my rundown? It's not. It's not in the rundown. So thank God for good directors who are able to cut to a one shot. We weren't anticipating doing this, but it was breaking news. Jen was reading the news, so you have to be really, really flexible, which really kind of messes up with some of your Ignite stuff sometimes. So being really, really focused and on top of it is super important because if you're a floor director, if you're a teleprompter operator, if you're an anchor, if you're anybody, you have to know that when you look at this, you're like, oh, that's not part of the plan, right? And that's okay, but you have to be talking to each other at all times because if it's not part of the plan and all of a sudden you see one shot and you're like, where is my one shot? We don't have one built. So what's next, right? Like where do we go from there? So this is where really good directing comes in. So if anybody here wants to be a director, this is That's also, I mean, it's the hardest show for a director to punch too, just because you have to be able to kind of change things on the fly. And anchors too. I mean, it's for everyone. I think it's really, really difficult because you have to be able to read breaking news. And half of the time, it's like half of the script is written because the producer didn't have time to finish reading it and they're just going to tell you to ad lib the rest. Or like, I printed this out, the floor director is going to run it to you. I don't have time to read it, but just read it. I don't have time to write it because I'm talking to the other reporters. Because right now, I'm also talking to Mark. Excuse me. I'm also talking to Mark. I'm also talking to the reporter Matt Galka, who I was supposed to have here. I'm talking to all of these people here at the same time. So this is kind of ad libbing right now. So now we're back on track, E14. So right now, Jolly is coming out. We're doing a thing on Jolly. That's what we're thinking. So we're like, oh, breaking news, let's change it. So you see E20.1, E20. These are all changes that I made last minute. So we've built a whole thing about Jolly losing a 2-shot, and then all of a sudden now we're going to bring in 2 other anchors because now we need to simulcast again. So breaking news, things change, lots of stuff happening. So for the viewer though, it doesn't, besides for like that little thing at the top of the 8:30, it doesn't really look like anything's going wrong. That's the point. That's the point of being a good producer. That's the point of being a good director. That's the point of being a good anchor. When you feel like everything's going wrong, the audience shouldn't know. The audience shouldn't know that my rundown looks like this. They should feel like it's all according to plan. But you'll hear, like, listen for a couple things now. I'll unmute this in a second and follow along with the rundown and see if you can tell what's kind of going wrong a little bit.
All about growing the market, solar market. Utilities want to grow the we just want to make sure that it's not only in our
Now we're at E19. Josh knows we're out of time. You can hear that. So what page are we on now? What happened there? You guys know what just happened? Did you notice anything? We went to a 1-shot and then a live shot. That was not in the rundown, right? So I tried to plan for this, but we didn't have time. Jolly started talking. These are things you can't control. Do you need to watch? You see he's talking? Scrap the plan, scrap the backup plan, just 1-shot on Josh, toss immediately to the Jolly thing, right? So like, you just have to be on your toes. You can plan as much as you can and it will help, but you have to be able to just throw everything out the window and keep going. The problem is that what time is it now? It's 8:40. So how long is my E-block supposed to be? 10 minutes or so, right? So I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to think about my breaks. And I'm like, I have to get in all these breaks before 9 o'clock, regardless of what keeps happening. But at the same time, I have a satellite window for Matt Galka. This is also very difficult for producers because sometimes you book satellite windows. Sometimes those windows can be as small as 5 minutes. Sometimes they can be Hopefully you have a 10-minute window. But that means that he's only going to be up there for 10 minutes. And if I was planning on taking him at 8:33, obviously that's not happening. So I'm trying to rebook my Matt Galka window so that maybe I can keep him here later up. I don't know, but I'm trying to deal with my ENG satellite coordinator. Remember from the newsroom jobs lecture, we saw an example of the person who's organizing all those satellite things. So I know I've killed Matt Galka, and I'm not really sure what's happening to Rubio's victory speech. You can't really tell where we're going next. We don't really know. At this point, my bosses all enter the room. My executive producer, my assistant news director, my news director all come in, and this is where it gets very difficult. They don't know what the producer knows, which is that I have 305 here. I have, where'd that other break go? All of my breaks started floating to the bottom. I moved them around. I deleted them. I have to know how many minutes of breaks I still need because people have paid a ton of money for election night coverage to get their ads in election shows.
Now, do they get any choice in like choosing what block or what time?
Sometimes they pay more for that. Sometimes they'll pay more to be in the first break. Sometimes they want to be at the end of the show. They do and sometimes they have to pay more for that. But they can choose that sometimes depending on what they're willing to pay. But in rare instances you can kill breaks. And so in this case I said, can I kill a break? Please let me kill a break because it's 8:42 and I should be almost done with my first break. I can push it, but I also know this is going to keep happening. It's not the end and then we're going to get back on track. At this point, you have to know on election night, we're off the rails. We're just like ad-libbing, tap dancing our way through the rest of the show. So I'm in my head calculating, thank God I have a pencil and a paper, which is the only time ever I'll tell you to use paper. But I'm writing down, okay, we have this many breaks left. We have this. So I'm telling my bosses because they're telling me what they think I should do. But I'm trying to explain to them, I still have breaks. Can I kill it or no? Yes or no? And so one of them says, kill it. And so awesome. Now I automatically have 3 extra minutes. Let's keep going. Now we go to Marco Rubio right away. So now Rubio pops up and starts his victory speech. So I'm like, okay, we still have 3 minutes. We'll be all right. Then like 10 minutes later, we find out we couldn't actually kill that break. We need to add it back in. So you can't put 2 breaks back to back because that's 6 minutes of commercial break. And then everyone's going to turn away and you're going to lose all your rating points. So this is when it gets really, really complicated to be a good producer because you have to be able to keep all of this in your mind while you're looking at everything. And you're communicating with everyone. Because guess what? Poor Peter and poor Paul Mueller, they're waiting there to go live. Poor Jim, he thinks he's going live. They're standing by. Like, you try your best to tell them, listen, I don't know what's happening right now, but just stand by please. I don't know if I'll even have you on. You might get on, you might not, but I need you to stand by. Because at any minute, if stuff just goes away and I need content, I have to rely on my reporters in the field to just pick up at any time where they left off. That's only if they're not satellite windows. So like with Matt Galka, for example, he was a satellite window. I could only go to him for that 10-minute period. Whereas my local reporters, like Paul Mueller, for example, it was our camera, our live truck, everything. He just needed to be standing by. So if you're a reporter, do not sit down and get out of no, stand up in front of the camera the whole time, at all times for the whole hour. Like, do not move. Do not go to the bathroom. Do not go get a drink. The reporter has to be able to look and see you and listen in your IFB and tell you what's going on, just in case. And I know that's super frustrating for reporters who are like, I stood there for an hour, you never went to me. I'm like, but I needed to have you there just in case. So it is frustrating for everybody, but it's also really exciting. It's also really fun. At this point, my e-block is 14 minutes long, so that's getting crazy. So that's part of the process here. I'm not going to make you watch the rest because we're kind of getting out of time here. But you can watch the rest of this and see we're kind of making it up as we went along. This was supposed to be a break, that we never went to. Now Patrick Murphy's up. What is happening, right? Like, everyone's deciding to talk at the exact same time. So it's important that you know who these people are. It's important that you know what they look like. It's important that you know what races they're running for. So you might think, you don't need to know all that stuff. You can just Google it. And I'm a big fan of like, I don't need to know everything. I just need to know how to find it really quickly. But on election night, you better know what everybody looks like so that you can immediately be like, Patrick Murphy's up, he's talking, he's losing, let's go. Like you have to be able to put up these lower thirds. Like Murphy loses Senate race. Like all of these things have to be up, right? And hopefully you have assistant producers and people to help you. This could be very difficult for one producer to do on their own. So I had people helping me with these graphics, which is really nice. But anyways, we can't forget that it's 8:48 and we still have a simulcast coming up. Right? So like that's another important part. You always have to be thinking like, oh, but any minute I need to be on another station and we still have to hit that hard time. So I can't go to break if I'm about to go to a simulcast. Right? So there's a million things to think about. Producing is super fun, but it's also very difficult. So the more you know about rundowns, the more you can prepare yourself, the more you have all these things built in, the easier it'll be to feel like you have a little control in situations that feel like your heart is going to explode. So feel free to watch the rest of this if you want to. There's a lot of other stuff here that we don't have time to get to. Watch the consumer block. Here are some examples of other little teases. What's wrong with these scripts? Lower thirds, writing to video. And here are some extra tips for producers, how to be better at promos. We went over teases, but this is kind of going in a little bit more on all of that. We mentioned maps earlier. What's wrong with this map? There's no streets. Here's the examples of good maps, all that stuff, and show wheels. So take a look at that, and then you're welcome to read my show critiques if you want to be a producer. You usually have to write a show critique to get it as a part of the application process. So you're welcome to read those. And then just let me know if you have any questions about anything. Otherwise, you guys are free to go.